said that Washington is in pursuit of the oil vessel in question and that they will, quote, end up getting it. Clearly now they have. But for weeks now, American officials have maintained that the Venezuelan oil tanker is not flying under a valid flag. That's the latest that is coming in. The big news that is coming at the moment, United States having seized that vessel, that shipping vessel. Let me go across to Susan, my colleague. She's getting us more on this. She's joining us from United States of America. Susan, get us the latest. This is, of course, big news coming in as far as United States seizing this vessel is concerned. Obviously, it will have implications on the US-Russia ties as well.
We'll have to wait and see. There are a lot of questions that need answers at this point, and including them what was exactly on this ship. The European command now is saying that the seizure of the vessel supports U.S. President Donald Trump's quote-unquote proclamation targeting sanctioned vessels that threaten the security and stability of the Western Hemisphere. The operation was executed by the DHS components with support from the Department of War, showcasing a whole government approach to protect this homeland. That's what we're hearing from the European command. Of course, this is a developing story. As I mentioned, a lot of questions still left unanswered, and whether or not we're going to hear, at least from a U.S. official in the United States, that's yet to be seen. We do have a planned presser by Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesperson, later on in the afternoon. This is definitely going to be on the agenda.
Right, Susan, we'll keep touching base with you as and when these details emerge and when we hear from both the American as well as the Russian side. Thank you very much for joining us at the moment and getting us the latest. All right, let's talk about the United States of America. American President Donald Trump wants Venezuelan oil, but the pathway to achieve this aim is uncertain and replete with chaos. Maduro's capture has changed the face of leadership in Venezuela, but because the government remains intact, there is not much change on the policy front. Most important pieces of Maduro's inner circle have all filled the vacuum for now. Washington-Caracas dynamics now depend on how this new power dynamic holds up in Venezuela. The balance of power lies between the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello, and Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino. The trio so far appears to be holding hands. According to reports, this is in line with what Donald Trump wants. Cabello and Padrino are on Washington's watch list. Vladimir Padrino and Cabello, remember, have $15 million and $25 million of bounty on them, respectively. United States is reportedly engaging in back-channel talks with these two men, warning them of a fate similar to Nicolas Maduro's. The demand is simple. The duo must ensure stability in Venezuela, while Washington pushes Delcy Rodriguez to toe the line.
The nation continues. Its destiny of development and prosperity, stability and order continues. And we, the soldiers of the nation, will be here to guarantee it.
The imperialist knows that it has a war prisoner on its territory, kidnapped here where the majority of Venezuelans elected him to be the constitutional president of our homeland.
Now, there is an old Trump connection of Venezuela's interim president that has resurfaced, and this connection dates back to 2017. Delcy Rodriguez was Venezuela's foreign minister when Trump rose to power for the first time. As per reports, she was the one who directed $500,000 donation to Donald Trump's inauguration. These funds were given through a US-based subsidiary of the Venezuelan state-owned oil company. Donald Trump wants access to Venezuelan oil, and to start with, he wants 50 to 60 million barrels. This amounts to $2 billion and almost 2 months of total production of Venezuelan oil. And so far, Delcy Rodriguez has vowed to resist Donald Trump's oil gambit.
We are here governing together with the people. The government of Venezuela is in charge in our country and no one else. There is no foreign agent governing Venezuela. It is Venezuela. It is its constitutional government.
Washington can roll the dice on military front if the diplomacy fails, but this will risk alienating Trump's MAGA support base, who largely oppose overseas military adventures and regime change wars. The situation is similar for Delcy Rodriguez as well. Any deal with Washington must not look like surrender to the Venezuelans. Every time the United States does a military strike on a different country, mostly the approval ratings of the sitting president have gone up in the past. But it seems like this isn't the case with Donald Trump. And it appears like the incumbent leader is aware of this exception. Ahead of the crucial midterm elections, American President Trump has claimed that he would be impeached if the Republicans fail to win the upcoming polls. Let's give you a context. While addressing House Republicans at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., Trump urged his party to stick together and fight for what he called 12 months of unprecedented success.
You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached.
Trump's comments come at a time when several polls have suggested that his approval ratings have stagnated or have not seen much of a hike, especially after the Venezuela strikes. Trump, who calls these polls rigged, also complained about his polling numbers during this address. Now, according to a survey conducted by The Economist and YouGov between 2nd and 5th January this year, Trump's approval rating stood at 39%, which is unchanged from its last survey. Another poll conducted by Reuters Ipsos between 4th and 5th of January showed a 3% uptick in Trump's approval ratings to 42%. Since October last year, Trump's approval ratings have been in the early 40s or below. During the address, Trump even floated the idea of cancelling future American elections. However, he was quick to insist that he was not calling for such a move and that his remarks were a critique of Democrats rather than a proposal. During an Oval Office meeting with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last year, Trump had voiced support for Ukraine's ban on elections under martial law. And back then, Trump had quipped that it would be a good thing if United States were at war 3.5 years into his second term and if he could do away with elections. However, there is no precedent for postponing elections in the United States federal law. In fact, the law leaves no room for a president to cancel or even postpone congressional polls. American presidential elections have kept their dates even at the height of the Civil War, the Spanish flu outbreak, and the more recent COVID outbreak. Now, with an eye on the midterm elections in November, can Donald Trump really turn the tide? That's the big question that we're asking. Let me go across to Mr. Greg Swenson. He is chairman of the Republicans Overseas UK. He's joining us live on the broadcast from Florida. Greg, good evening. Welcome to WION. I want to start by asking you, of course, the Venezuelan strikes would have made the Republican Party and Donald Trump think that perhaps the approval ratings will see a hike. That clearly hasn't happened.
Yeah, and it probably will happen, and it all depends on the economy and affordability. That's the big issue. So, while President Trump has had great successes with foreign policy and with this recent intervention in Venezuela as well as Iran last summer, the American voter doesn't really care that much about foreign policy. So I think he's doing the right thing in looking after American interests and Western interests around the world. But I think he's got to change and refocus back on domestic issues and the economy. If he does that, his numbers will clearly go up. I don't have any problem with that. Remember, Ronald Reagan was polling at 35 in early January, or early 1983. And a year and a half later, he won 49 states in arguably the greatest landslide in American electoral history. So, it's a little early, but I do agree that the president is not polling high enough right now to bring Republicans a big victory in the midterms, but that can change a lot. 9 months, 10 months in electoral politics is a long time.
Sure, this is a long time, and this is what I was coming to next, Greg. The fact that the president isn't significantly or largely talking about the affordability crisis, the Medicaid cut that has happened, and those are the issues that actually plague the voters. That's what they're concerned about, because, of course, we all know that a lot of MAGA voters do not support such military strikes out of the country. So why isn't the president talking about all of these issues?
Yeah, it's a great question, Shreya. I think what the president did pivot right after the November elections of 2 months ago, when you saw, some pretty fairly, I wouldn't say significant, but comfortable wins by the Democrats. They were in blue states that they would have won anyway, but they won with bigger margins than was expected. And so I think right after those off-year elections in early November, you saw the president, as well as the members of his cabinet, especially the Treasury Secretary, really pivot toward affordability and talking about the economy. But sometimes the real world gets in the way. And I think this whole issue with Venezuela was very timely and it was urgent. And so, that in a perfect world, he could have stayed on point and just talked about domestic issues. And the news in the economy, by the way, is really positive. So I think this will, if he can get this, foreign policy stuff behind him over the next few weeks and really pivot again back to the economy and affordability, it will favor him because the numbers are really positive. You don't hear that from the mainstream media here in the US, but the GDP growth was 4.3%. Inflation was well below 3% at 2.7. These are fantastic numbers, and you're starting to see a recovery in real earnings, in earnings adjusted for inflation. They were up significantly in Trump's first term. They were down in Biden's term, down 4%. And they're up 1.5% already in Trump's second term. So if that continues and we get real wages up, I think the Republicans will do much better in the midterms.
And so, Greg, my last question to you, and a quick one at that, because you were talking about how Ronald Reagan was an exception and he turned the tide and all. In the past, we've seen in the 1930s as well, there was an exception of a ruling party winning the midterm elections. And obviously, the focus is now on the midterm elections coming up in November. No ruling party has ever won that except in the 1930s, the two examples that we have. But how do you see this happening for Republicans? Because the Democrats clearly have been upping the ante against Donald Trump as far as the Epstein files are concerned.
Well, without a doubt, I don't think the Epstein files will affect it at all. But I do totally agree with you that the party in power always loses seats in the midterms, and we don't have a lot of seats to lose as Republicans. So, all historical metrics would suggest the Democrats win the House. However, as you pointed out, there are exceptions. It happened for George W. Bush in 2002 when the Republicans picked up seats. But, you had the post 9/11 momentum for W. He was polling at 70% at the time. So you had a lot more unity in the country then. So, and then, of course, Bill Clinton picked up seats in the 98 midterms because of the backlash against his impeachment. So, so many things can happen. I would have to agree that I would favor the Democrats in terms of trying to predict this election just because almost all the time they win.
All right, we'll leave it there. Let's wait and watch what happens in the next few months and, of course, the big midterm elections in November. Greg Swenson, thank you very much for joining us on WION and sharing your perspective.
Thanks for having me.
All right, shifting our focus now to Iran, where the country's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, has ordered security forces not to crack down on economic protesters, even as unrest continues to spread across the country. This directive was confirmed after a cabinet meeting where Vice President Mohammad Jafar said that the president had clearly instructed authorities to avoid using force against peaceful demonstrators. Pezeshkian, however, drew a sharp line between protest and violence. Officials said those carrying weapons attacking the police stations or military sites would be treated as rioters, not as protesters.
کسانی که امروز
Those who today come into the streets to take part in riots, or lead them, or support them, or assist them, in light of this explicit declaration of position by the criminal Zionist regime, and likewise by the criminal President of the United States, and the issues they raised, that if anyone comes into the streets for riots or to create insecurity or supports them, then no excuse remains for them.
Meanwhile, the exiled son of Iran's toppled Shah, Reza Pahlavi, urged Iran's armed and security forces and side with people. He called for more protests amid unrelenting unrest in the country triggered by deepening distress over economic hardships.
I am sharing my first call with you today and invite you all to begin chanting at 8 p.m. this Friday and Thursday, whether in the streets or even from your homes. This is a direct message addressed to Iran's armed and security forces, you who wear a military uniform to defend the Iranian nation and who are now facing a historic choice.
This, remember, comes as social media videos from January 5th show clashes between protesters and security forces in Sari, in Mazandaran province. Meanwhile, separate images from Iran Sheher in Sistan and Baluchistan province show protesters setting fire to statues of Iran's first supreme leader, Ruhollah Khomeini, and his successor, Ali Khamenei, a rare and highly symbolic act of defiance. Iranian authorities, meanwhile, have not published an official death toll. However, the US-based human rights activist news agency reported the toll at 36. It said that 34 of those confirmed killed were protesters, while 2 were affiliated with security forces. Over 2,000 people are said to be detained. The group relies on an internal activist network and has been accurate in its reporting in the past. The protesters were triggered by anger over the rising cost of living. The wave began on the 28th of December with a shutdown by merchants in the Tehran Bazaar, which is a national economic hub. It has since spread to other areas. Students have joined in. And according to the rights group, over the past 10 days, at least 285 locations in 92 cities across 27 provinces have all witnessed protests. Internationally, the crisis is drawing sharp reactions as well. American President Trump has warned that Washington could step in if Iranian security forces fire at the protesters. Separately, Australia has issued a level 4 travel advisory for Iran. It has cautioned citizens to avoid large public gatherings by citing severe security forces' response to the protesters. It has also suspended its embassy operations in the country at the moment. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, meanwhile, said that he identifies with the Iranian people and their aspirations for freedom. But Tehran has pushed back hard. Iran has warned that any American interference would plunge the region into chaos. And keeping with updates from West Asia, the battle for the control of southern Yemen has now intensified. Saudi-backed coalition is taking over large swaths of territory from Southern Transitional Council, which is the STC. The latest one in the line of fire is STC leader Aydros al-Zubidi himself. At least 4 people were killed as more than 15 airstrikes hit Dhaleh, which is the home governorate Southern Transitional Council leader al-Zubidi. Last month, the STC seized large areas before their advance was rolled back by the coalition and pro-Saudi forces. The coalition said al-Zubidi fled and mobilized large forces in Yemen's southwest around Aden following his decision not to attend the Riyadh talks. Coalition spokesperson Major General Turki al-Maliki said that al-Zubidi fled to an unknown location after he had distributed weapons and ammunition to dozens of elements inside Aden. He said the coalition carried out new strikes to prevent al-Zubidi from escalating the conflict and extending it into the Dhaleh governorate. The Presidential Leadership Council, meanwhile, that holds executive power and groups rival factions, announced al-Zubidi's removal, accusing him of high treason after he did not board the plane to Riyadh, where talks were planned. Yemen separatists, meanwhile, have urged Saudi Arabia to halt their airstrikes and said that their leader was still in Aden. Now, these latest developments raise the prospect of a showdown between the UAE-supported STC and pro-Saudi forces around Aden, base of the internationally recognized government, since it was ousted from the capital Sana'a by Iran-backed Houthi rebels in 2014. Aden residents fear being cut off following clashes in government-run areas, while hoping for tensions to ease.
We hope for de-escalation. Do the coming days hold stability or calm for us? No one knows, but we hope for de-escalation.
What worries us is people's basic livelihoods. Of course, people have gone for some time without salaries. They fear that they could be cut off, along with other essentials. The people of Aden in particular live very simple lives, and this situation could have a psychological impact on them.
More than 100 people have been killed in the airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition on the newly seized separatist positions in the southern governorates. All right, shifting our focus now to Bangladesh as the country inches closer to elections, repeated incidents of minority mob killings have cast a shadow of fear. Earlier in the day, yet another Hindu man, Mithun Sarkar, fell victim. He was chased by a mob accusing him of theft and robbery. To escape, he jumped in a canal to save his life, but unfortunately, he died by drowning. This is the latest incident in line of many such attacks which have taken place since December last year. So far, various men belonging to the Hindu minority community have been attacked. The rate of violence remains alarming. In December alone, at least 51 incidents of violence were reported against minorities. These include 10 murders, 10 cases of theft and robbery, and 23 incidents involving the forceful occupation of homes. The government has so far condemned these attacks. Officials have made various arrests and investigations are already underway in some of the cases. But the overall reaction so far has failed to stop the attacks on minorities in Bangladesh. The sporadic violence comes at a time when the country is heading for elections. This will be the first time when the country holds polls after the ouster of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. But the threat of violence has left the minority communities in Bangladesh worried about their safety. To bring attention to the matter, an 8-member delegation representing minority communities met with BNP's acting chairperson Tariq Rahman at the party office. They presented an 8-point list of demands, citing rising violence and urging the BNP to include protections in their election manifesto. Tariq Rahman reportedly agreed that law and order was essential to public safety and rebuilding democracy. On the other hand, Bangladesh's far-right Islamist party, Jamaat-e-Islami, has opened up a new front against the interim government led by Muhammad Yunus. The Jamaat has claimed that conditions for a free and fair vote are not yet in place and accused a section of the interim government of favoring a specific political party. Bangladesh heads to polls on the 12th of February this year, but the political and social realities are making the task tough for the Yunus government. The promise of making the elections free, fair, inclusive and acceptable must be kept for long-term stability in Bangladesh. All right, with that, it's time to wrap Race to Power up, but news and updates will continue on WION. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Bye-bye.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders, psychopaths who defy explanation, international war crimes, and millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yowon.com.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS centenary year.